Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock. We have rescued Ashley from the Cavs for a pod here, at least, back here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, recording this on Wednesday. It's about 5 o'clock. And of course, we're talking schedule because on Thursday night, 8 p.m., the full NFL schedule will be out. We do know the full slate of international games. We know some of the openers, things like that. There's a pre-Thanksgiving game, a Wednesday night, a day before Thanksgiving game this year. I had forgotten about that, but they announced that, I guess, today. So, we're getting a lot of these games. And, of course, throughout the day tomorrow, there'll be a bunch of weird accounts on Twitter that are leaking games out that come out of the woodwork every year and then disappear until the next schedule release. So we're going to look at the Browns' schedule, obviously not knowing when they're playing these opponents, but knowing who their opponents are. And we're going to just go through some different categories and come up with some different things as we look at this schedule. And let's just start here. We know the division games, Mary Kay, are always interesting. They're always exciting. Anything can happen in these division games. When you look at their non-division opponents, so just to run that through for everybody, their non-division opponents. So that's Houston, Indy, Atlanta, Las Vegas, and Carolina at home. It's Jacksonville, New Orleans, Tampa, the Jets, Giants, and Titans on the road. Their non-division opponents, Mary Kay, what's the most intriguing to you?
Well, I would have to say there are a few that fit this category for me. But because I have to pick one, I think I'm going to pick Kevin Stefanski coming back to the lakefront with those Atlanta Falcons who went 8-9 last year. Kevin coming back and coaching the football team that fired him the day after the season. Very curious to see how that's going to go. See what he can bring to the table with the Falcons. Is he going to have Michael Penix back from his torn ACL by the time the Falcons play the Cleveland Browns? Not sure if he's going to be right back at the start of it. And again, there are a number of other games, and I'm glad you guys are going to have some really good choices in this category too. But I think I'm going to go Kevin Stefanski coming back to the place that he spent 6 seasons. That's the longest tenured coach in the new era. And it just was, again, pretty controversial the way that all of this went down this year. I've talked to people that believe that the whole Shedeur Sanders situation really kind of led to the end of Kevin Stefanski. I don't know if that's true or not, but some people believe that it is. So very curious to, just to see how this goes with Kevin coming back here.
I do wonder what kind of reception he's going to get. I think it'll be a positive one from the fans, especially because Kevin's not going to say anything inflammatory leading up to this game. We know that from years of covering him. So I do wonder, though, will the Browns play a tribute video? Because look, he was the most successful coach this team has had since they've come back in 1999. He won a playoff game. Now, granted, he wasn't at that playoff game, but his team won a playoff game. So I do wonder, I know it didn't end great, and I know fans kind of soured on him and his kind of say nothing approach towards the end there, although I'm sure there's a lot of fans out there that believe he shouldn't have been fired. I wonder what that reception is going to be, Ashley, but it's going to be a very interesting week. Again, not from Kevin, but we know there's some guys in that locker room that aren't afraid to say some things. And if they have some thoughts on Kevin Stefanski, good or bad, I think they'll let it be known. So that should be a very interesting week.
Yeah, I think we disagree on this, Dan, because I think it's going to be kind of a negative reception. I don't know. I'm kind of shocked by this. You're normally, I don't know, I lean kind of negative in general, but I think you're normally pessimistic on this podcast. I think I might be more or equal to you in pessimism in real life, and I tend to be a little more positive on these things. But Browns fans are so passionate on game day, especially, and I do think just this idea that it sort of had soured by the end, right? I think most fans were happy to see this shift happen. Like, I think they were just ready for a change. Like you said, they got sick of the kind of say nothing approach. And it's not going to surprise me if it's mostly boos, especially given the last 2 years. So that is what I think about that. But look, I think this is why it's a good argument for why it's going to be such an interesting matchup. And I mean, coupled with the fact that there's so many former people that were on this Browns coaching staff, and we've talked about this idea of we're going to have some real-time fact checking going on in terms of like fired coaches and former players, and was it coach or was it system, because the Browns, so much of their roster is the same, right? But the offense is going to be totally different, and then Kevin is sort of running it back down there. Isn't Austin Hooper down there for some reason as well? Haven't we had that discussion?
Maybe,
Isn't he an Atlanta Falcon now?
yeah, maybe he's back in Atlanta. I got to check. That
I
feels like
think
it
he's
came up. I'm gonna do some
I
real time
feel like
fact
it
checking
came
here.
up recently while Dan does some real-time fact-checking, but I do think this is, for sure, one of the most interesting non-division matchups for the Browns this year. Just given all of the shared connections, there's always, to give readers some background in the game notes, there's always a page, typically for every team, about shared connections where it goes through like, oh, these guys were in college together and these guys were on the Browns these years. Like, that page might need to be 2 or 3 pages for this matchup this year.
Austin Hooper is back with the Atlanta Falcons. So there we go. He really is running it back. I don't know, Mary Kay. I mean, what do you think I don't know. I guess to me, I look at it like, what did Kevin do? Like, what did Kevin do to deserve to get like a negative reaction? Obviously, he lost a bunch of games at the end, and this isn't even like a did he or didn't he deserve to get fired situation to me. It's just like, I don't know. I think there was a time when people were pretty happy that Kevin got extended and they thought they had a guy who was going to be a coach here for a long time. And then it sort of flamed out at the end. Maybe this is going to be a social media versus real life moment, because I do think there are certainly some very outspoken anti-Kevin people on social media. Maybe that has filtered out into the real world too. I don't know. Do you expect a negative reaction to Kevin?
Well, I think it might depend in part on how Shador is doing. I mean, if Shador is the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns and he's playing well, that might reflect poorly on Kevin. A lot of people thought that, I mean, the narrative that was created, the false narrative, in my opinion, that was created on the internet was that he tried to sabotage Shador. I don't think that's true at all, but I do think there is a large segment of the fan base that thinks perhaps that's true, that he somehow sabotaged Shador. And the reason why I say I don't agree with that, because I actually saw him coaching him and all the extra coaching that they did with Shador to get him ready to play. And we know about all the time that he worked with Shador in the mornings in the office, going over film with him and putting in the extra time. So I don't think that's true, but there are fans that might think that's true and might believe that, because once something is repeated over and over and over again on the internet and social media, people tend to think that that is true. And it's not true. I'm here to say it's not true. But that might carry over into the game. If Shador is out there succeeding, people might hold that against Kevin. Like, look, he could have been doing this all last year if you would have given him that chance. So I don't know. I think that could factor into this whole thing.
Okay, Ashley, I'll give you the layup here if you want it. The next in line for most intriguing
I know.
matchup.
I was debating taking the layup or going. There is potentially a third layup-ish. I'll call it a sort of contested teardrop that I think you can take here if you wanted to. Dan, I'm going to leave it up to you because you covered the guy longer than me. Do you want me to leave you the obvious layup here?
No, go ahead. Go for it. Take the one you want.
I'll take Baker Mayfield and the Bucks hosting the Browns, because this is only the second time Baker Mayfield will have played against the Browns, which kind of hard to believe, but makes sense because obviously he's like not been in the AFC in all the time he's left. So the only time that he's played against the team that took him number 1 overall back in 2018 was the 2022 season opener, the first year gone after he was replaced by Deshaun Watson. That was the game that Cade York made the 50-plus yard field goal and rescued the Browns at the very, very very last second, of course. So Baker's never played against the Browns since then. We know that Baker will get himself fired up for this game. Now, I would argue that a lot of the reasons he has to be fired up about are obviously no longer here. Everyone probably saw his offseason tweet directed at Kevin Stefanski and those two now being in the same division. So I do think a lot of his ire has traveled that way, but there's certainly, I think, plenty considering, look, they got rid of him because they traded for Deshaun Watson, right? For all we know right now, maybe Deshaun Watson is starting that game, which would be crazy. Of course, Andrew Berry's still here, big part of the decision making. And Baker knows how to get himself up in terms of the grudges that he holds. We've seen it time and time again. I would argue it's when he is at his best. Baker versus Myles Garrett, like all these interesting things are going on, I think, between Baker Mayfield and this defense, and there's a lot of potential there for sure.
Yeah, I think this gets softened just a little by not having Kevin on the sideline and because they have played Baker already. But Mary Kay, especially if Deshaun Watson starts this game, that just adds a whole nother layer to this. To Ashley's point, I mean, Andrew Berry told us at Deshaun's introductory press conference that he was looking into Deshaun Watson while Baker Mayfield was still the starting quarterback of this football team. Like, there were other people in this organization that are still here that signed off on that move. Andrew made the trip down to Houston to meet with Deshaun. It feels like, he was spearheading that. And of course, the Haslams, whether it's 100% true or not, and we've talked about this on the pod a little bit, like the Haslams did take the blame for the Deshaun Watson thing. They're obviously still here. So I agree that we have these two in the right order because it is a road game. I think if it were a home game, that would maybe change it because it's a road game, because they've seen Baker before, and because Kevin is gone. But this is still very much, I don't think Baker's going to be putting out off the leash shirts like he did before the Carolina game, but this is still very much a revenge game, a guy that loves to put a chip on his shoulder, look for any reason to get pumped up for a game. This is very much that for Baker Mayfield, especially if Deshaun Watson is the starting quarterback.
Right. And there is another aspect to this, which is enormous. And that is there is no love lost between Myles Garrett and Baker Mayfield, right? I mean, I remember interviewing Myles Garrett the year that Baker had been traded, and he told me Baker, texted me goodbye and I didn't answer the text, and wished him well, and Myles said he didn't answer the text, and there was some bad blood left over from the whole OBJ thing and from other things. I mean, it was a complicated relationship between those two, and I think, and I've written this before, I believe that it dates all the way back to the very beginning, when Baker was a rookie, and he actually said that if he had the number one overall pick in 2017, he would have drafted Patrick Mahomes. And he said that as a teammate of Myles Garrett. So I think that was the first strike right there. And then it continued on, and there were a few other things, including right after the Mason Rudolph helmet incident, when Baker Mayfield went on national television and said afterwards, that's unacceptable and you can't do something like that. And, that didn't sit well either. And he had to be kind of schooled by some other defensive linemen about how you don't do that to a teammate on national television. So there's no love lost between those two guys. And it sets up quite an intriguing matchup of the NFL Defensive Player of the Year against the opposing quarterback whose head he's going to want to tear off during the football game. So I just think that that's going to be quite an interesting storyline.
Oh, and by the way, it's Todd Monken returning to Tampa too. So you've got that. Obviously, he wasn't retained when they hired Bruce Arians to come in as their head coach. So there's a little bit of that as well, and I'm sure Todd will play that angle up a little bit to get the guys fired up. There's a couple ways I could go with this. I think the other layup you were thinking about, Ashley, has to do with a former AFC North head coach. Am I thinking the right thing there? No? Okay. Well, I got to take a closer look. The most I think I'm going to go that way though, unless I'm just going to look this over real quick to make sure I'm not missing a really obvious one.
There's another, Dan, can I give you,
Yes,
because
go
we
ahead.
don't know, I'll give you a hint. You're gonna figure it out. There's
Okay.
a possibility.
Grudge match.
Yeah, for another grudge match.
A
Between a
possibility for another
potential
graduate.
between a quarterback and a former team.
All right, you got to
But
get.
it makes it
Come on.
harder
Oh,
You
because
can see
we
it.
don't know if this person will be starting, but they very well could be.
okay. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, that's an interesting one. And so you're talking about Houston, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that was on my list for a different reason, because when you look at these two defenses, these were, you could argue Houston had the best defensive football last year. You could also argue the Browns had the best defensive football. You could argue Denver had the best, whatever. There was like 3 or 4 teams you can make this argument for. And you go back and look at some of the numbers, and it's like these were two of the absolute best defenses. Like they're right there with each other. 2 great pass rushes, 2 great secondaries. So there's that element of it. And then, of course, there is that Deshaun Watson facing his former team element. I guess I sort of downplayed that a little because, sort of like the Baker thing, it's partially because of location, partially because we've seen Deshaun go against the Texans before. That was his first game back. It was in Houston, and it just feels so long ago. I don't know. It doesn't do as much for me, I guess, as like Baker versus the Browns or something like that. But Mary Kay, am I wrong about that? Is that Deshaun wound kind of fresh for him, do you think, with Houston?
Well, it's lost some of its sizzle over the years, I would think, but I still think that it will be pretty meaningful to him. Nothing like what it was like to actually go back to Houston. Because that game is in Cleveland, it won't pack the same wallop, I don't think. But there definitely is some intrigue in there. And if you saw something else here on the schedule that you thought was more interesting or more intriguing, I think a case could be made for that as well.
I don't think it is, because my other case was going to be John Harbaugh and the Giants, just because, okay, it's Harbaugh. He chose the Giants, obviously, guy who knows the Browns really well. But I do think, kind of sitting here talking it out, Ashley, I do think that the Deshaun versus Texans thing is more interesting than like, oh, John Harbaugh's wearing different colors now, but he's still a head coach. He's still going to, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think that's probably the more intriguing thing. It's just, to me, I think that return, I guess you can make the same case for the Baker thing. That return to Houston back in 2022 was just so intense, and it was just so under the microscope. This one almost feels like, okay, and so much has happened. But yeah, I'm sure Deshaun, if he's starting, is, I think you're right, Ashley. I think that's the one.
I'm glad to hear it. I knew I could get you with a few hints, but it admittedly is not one I would have thought about in that grudge match as much because of like what Mary Kay said, some of the sizzle being gone, because it's not like he's going back to Houston. And we had that game, like, can it get much more grudge matchy than he comes back and the first team he has to play is Houston in Houston? Like, you're not going to get much more storylines out of this than that. But I mean, I still think it's there. And I agree with you, Dan. Like, when I was thinking about bringing it up, though, it was because of the defenses. Like, not only is it another really good defense, but it's one of the handful of defenses that plays this system that the Browns do. There's not a lot of them that do it anymore. They've much more gone to that sort of Vic Fangio school when you look at these popular defenses. And I think the Browns are going to look different, but Houston is still obviously a really good defense to contend with. In terms of storylines, hey, they got the best of the Browns really badly in that wild card matchup the last time the Browns were in the playoffs. So there's plenty of interest there for sure, I think.
Okay, let's move on to some other categories. So let's get to, we're going to save favorite trip for last here. Let's get to the biggest upset chance. So this one's complicated, right? Because you've got to look at these opponents. You've got to figure out, who you think who you're kind of looking at and saying, oh, there's no way they're going to beat that team. But and obviously I have not gone as far to look at early lines or anything like that. Whatever's out there at this point, if there is anything out there. Biggest upset chance. we're going to talk strength of schedule here. Like, Ashley, I'm looking at this schedule and I'm not seeing like a bunch of games where I feel like the Browns will be huge underdogs. Like, there's not, going into last season, we're looking at, well, they play the Packers early, they play the Lions early, they play a bunch of these teams where there's just no way they're going to be favored. I don't know that a lot of those exist. I mean, I guess we can leave the division open for this if you if you want to just pick a division team. But who do you see as maybe the biggest upset chance on this schedule?
You know, I don't know. Maybe you guys would disagree with me on this because of this team, but I'm going to go with like, I feel like maybe people are, and especially given the records this past year, are not going to be picking them to beat Jacksonville. Like, it just feels like a team they're not going to beat. It's obviously the team that they're going to play this year that had the best record last season. So I'm just going to take that one right now because, I mean, we've seen them obviously beat Jacksonville before. It just feels like one of those teams that, hey, they match up fairly well against Trevor Lawrence, especially with this defense. Now, the one time they beat them, he was playing on a bad ankle in that 2023 season. That was part of the Browns defense's streak of getting lucky. But I could see them going down to Jacksonville and winning another one of these games. They were obviously the only road game they won in 2024 when they have that 3-win season. So I'll go big on this one and say maybe they'll beat the team that had the best record last year that's on their schedule.
That was the last game Deshaun Watson won, also going all the way back to week 2 of 2024. I think that's a good choice. That's one that I had circled. Mary Kay, did you have one on here that maybe it's Jacksonville? I don't know. Do you have one on here that you think is the biggest upset possibility?
Well, I was actually going to attack it from the other angle and
Oh, you're
think
going
of,
somebody to upset the Browns?
somebody that
Okay,
might
that's
upset
good too.
the Browns that we wouldn't necessarily expect them to lose to next year. And there are a couple of candidates that I could cite here, and I might take. This is going to be a tough one. I might take the Jets for that. I might take the Jets because they're going to be on the road again. And just like the last time they went up there and played the Jets, weird special team stuff happened. It's hard to go on the road and beat anybody. But I think the Jets are going to be a better football team this year. And their starting quarterback, I think, is going to be Geno Smith. And let's see if Geno Smith can kind of revive his career a little bit. He was not protected well when he played last year for the Raiders. And I think that he's probably going to have maybe a better supporting cast this year. And I haven't looked at everything that the Jets have done, but I think that's a team that might be able to get things turned around a little bit if Geno can go out there and be the Geno that he had been prior to last year. So I'm going to go Jets.
That's a good one. So if we're staying with that vein, there's a team that I'm kind of looking at that I'm wondering. I'm really intrigued by this team, and there are some things that could happen that make me wonder if they're going to be better. This is a team the Browns lost to last year, also, by the way, at home. The Titans. Like, I don't know how good the Titans are going to be, but you've got Cam Ward going into year 2, so let's see if he's a little bit better. He had a shaky rookie year, but let's see what he looks like in year 2. Robert Saleh, I think he's a better coach than I think he gets credit for with the Jets. I think that's a situation. I think the Jets are a little bit like the Browns in that you sort of have to grade on a curve when we're talking about coaches there. Like, he did some okay things there with the Jets. Obviously, it wasn't good enough, but we know he's a great defensive coach. Brian Dable is their their OC. That's interesting. How is that going to change that offense there? So, and they've got some guys on that defense. I mean, Jeffrey Simmons is as big a game wrecker as there is on the interior of a defense. So I think that's a game being on the road. I think the Browns would be favored on the road in that game, but not knowing what their quarterback situation is going to be, who knows when that game will happen. over the course of the schedule, but that's one that I would circle as like, could the Browns go to that game as favorites and just get beat because Cam Ward's playing out of his mind this year, and they've found the right combo with Robert Saleh and Brian Dable. So that's one that I would circle. Ashley, I guided you in the wrong direction on this question, so we'll go again. We'll go round 2 here.
Yeah.
Who's the biggest upset potential?
Yeah, the biggest upset potential, again, I mean, I am this is so hard for me. I feel like this is just so bad with, like, I wonder if, like, the Panthers, what about
I
the
would think
Panthers game? They're at home. Like, I would think the Browns are gonna be favored in that game.
maybe a little, yeah, because I mean, the
And,
Panthers were a
like,
playoff team last year, but not like
that's what I
whoa, they
mean.
were really awesome. They just
They
kind of
were a
snuck in.
playoff team that was, like, shocking. I mean, to be quite honest, the Panthers are the team that knocked me out of my survivor pool last year because I thought, well, surely the Packers are going to beat the Panthers, and then they didn't. So that, besides the ones we've mentioned, that is the one jumping out to me right now is like, hey, you might want to watch this. Like, that might be the game that fans are like, oh yeah, I'll go to that one. They're for sure going to win. It's like everyone's going to be looking past it. And then I don't know, what if Bryce Young has like an amazing game out of nowhere and then suddenly the Browns lose by a score or two?
Yeah, that was an 8-9 football team last year. So
And
it was
it just feels like there's always one of those games like that like they lose at home that everyone's like, but how did they lose that one? Like it happens every year, like the Jets game in 2022. I think about the Saints game, the Cold game that year, right? Like there's always one of those. The Titans last year. It does tend to happen.
So let's kind of piggyback onto this next topic that we were going to do. We're going to talk a little strength of schedule and, maybe if there's a team on this schedule that you think could be better. I mean, Mary Kay, you've been writing a lot about some of the advantages that the Browns might find on this schedule. You put up a post right before we hit record on this podcast about, they aren't their travel miles. They're like 31st in the league and how far they have to travel this year. And strength of schedule is a big one. And their strength of schedule by record last year is the easiest in the NFL. We mentioned Warren Sharp's system has it like 4th in the NFL. So anyway, you kind of look at it, it is an easier schedule than they had last year and a top 5 easiest schedule in the league. But we also know that can be a little bit misleading. And it's not always just as cut and dry as like, well, these teams stunk last year, so now the schedule is easier.
Right. And I think the thing and some of the points that I have tried to make in the strength of schedule space is the fact that, again, there are some of those extenuating circumstances. For instance, 2 of the quarterbacks that they're facing this year, if they're healthy enough, the Falcons, Michael Penix Jr., and the Colts, Daniel Jones, they missed a significant amount of games last year with season-ending injuries. Penix missed 8 with his torn ACL. Jones missed 4 with his Achilles. And so those are teams that could be on the rebound if they get those quarterbacks back healthy. So that's one thing to kind of take a look at there. The Falcons ended up at 8-9 and the Colts ended up at 8-9. And there's a chance that if they had their starting quarterbacks for the rest of the season, that those 2 teams would have been winning football teams. So I think that's one thing. In terms of strength of schedule, the Browns only played 3 teams that ended up with winning records last season. And that's really crazy when you think about it. But it was the Jaguars who finished 13-4, the Texans 12-5, and the Steelers 10-7. Only 3 winning teams, 3 playoff teams. Once again, there were 5 teams of the 14 losing teams that they're facing that finished 8-9. So any of those teams, if they just kind of get their act back together a little bit, can challenge for the playoffs this year. That includes the Ravens, Colts, Falcons, Panthers, Bucks, right? And the Bucks had injuries last year too. They had injuries. The Ravens, Lamar had some injuries. So these are teams that, that could possibly come back up off the mat and make some noise again this year. So I don't think that that strength of schedule is necessarily going to hold up throughout the season. The other thing is nobody really knows the impact that Fernando Mendoza will have on the Raiders in his first season. First of all, they have to protect him. I mean, they've got to protect him or he's not going to be able to function. But if they can do that, maybe he helps them rebound a little bit. We've seen other rookie quarterbacks come in and do really well in their first seasons. So he's the number 1 overall pick. You would expect that he could do that, but you never know how it's actually going to work out. So strength of schedule, again, can be a little bit misleading. And these are some of the reasons why.
Yeah, and I just pulled up last year's Browns schedule, and when you just sort of look through, some of these teams, what we were saying about some of these teams at this time a year ago, a team like Minnesota, they obviously took a big step. Now, of course, the Browns lost to them, but they took a big step back last year, and they had questions at quarterback that we weren't sure they were going to have at this time. Nobody thought New England, kind of going the other way. Nobody thought New England was going to win the AFC. And they end up being one of the better teams on the Browns schedule. So all of this stuff, the Bears are an example of this too. I don't think anybody expected the Bears to necessarily make the leap that they did last year, but they did. So I just think you can always find examples of this, Ashley, where what we talk about when the schedule comes out versus what happens in real life can be two very different things. And sometimes it's because a team is actually better or worse than we thought. Sometimes it's injury. Sometimes it's timing, whatever. What we say about strength of schedule now can change dramatically in the next few months.
Yeah, or I think about 2 years ago, like maybe the best example of this is everyone thinking, oh, the Browns will walk all over the Commanders. And then Jaden Daniels has an amazing rookie season. And like they're an example of a team that took a step back last year, right? And injuries and he was hurt and all of those things. So that's why it's like you have to be wary of the schedule game. And like I think there are some instances where like the wariness is wise, but sometimes it ends up being true. Like those first 6 games last year did end up being a gauntlet for this football team. They were really, really hard games. It was a really rough stretch for them. And part of that was because an international game was thrown in the mix. But it's funny at the same time because we were saying, oh, they have their 3 division opponents and like probably the 3 best NFC North teams they're going to have to play in that stretch. And the Vikings ended up being the worst NFC North team that they played. So I do think it is interesting to see how all that stuff plays out. And it does make it really, really hard. And you have to be wary of a lot in terms of that projection.
And I remember even going into like that Patriots game, it was kind of like, are we sure they're this good? Well, they ended up going to the the AFC Championship game, and then they beat the Browns up pretty good in that game. So it like, is there a sleeper here? Is there some? I mean, Mary Kay, you've been talking Fernando Mendoza, the Raiders. I just talked a little bit about the Titans. Do you see a sleeper here? A team that maybe people are looking at and saying, that's a gimme for whoever plays that football team, but maybe we shouldn't be saying that.
Well, I think there are a number of other of football teams on the Browns schedule this year where you could point to that team and say, maybe, just maybe, they might be onto something in this coming season. Now, are we onto our final thing yet? Are we just like sort of morphing into opponent most likely to improve in 2020?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So, so I have a number of teams in this category that we could kind of kick around a little bit and the reasons why. I mean, the Saints went 6-11 last season and they have a 2nd-year quarterback, Tyler Shook, starting for them. There are 3 opponents in 2026 that have quarterbacks who were drafted in 2025 that are starting for their football teams and might be able to take that leap forward in 2026. That is the Titans, Cam Ward, number 1 overall pick. That is the Giants, Jackson Dart. He was 20 something. Can't remember exactly the number of, it was like maybe 25 or something like that. Yes, 25. Jackson Dart was number 25 in the first round. And then Tyler Shook was the number 40 overall pick. And he was in the 2nd round. And all 3 of these quarterbacks could take that next step up, that big leap that you hope your quarterback takes in a second season. The Giants finished 4-13. Of course, now they've got John Harbaugh there coaching that football team. And then the Titans went 3-14 and the Saints 6-11. So all three of those teams, as well as the Raiders now with Fernando Mendoza, I think you can circle all those teams and wonder if they might not be a little bit better or a lot better in 2026.
Yeah, I've got to say, like, I mean, I just pulled up the Saints depth chart. Now, this obviously isn't anything official, but you know, there's some guys I like on this team, and there's a few spots where I'm like, you know, man, we sit here and talk up guys like Isaiah Bond and Casey Concepcion and Spencer Fana. Like, the Saints have some of those guys too that I'm sure in New Orleans they're talking some of these guys up. Like, hey, this guy could be something. And I'm sure in these other markets there's players like that as well. So I think the Saints could be interesting, and that's a tough place to play too. If we want to talk again, I don't know if the Browns would be favored going down there or not, but if they were, that's a difficult place to play. We just watched them lose a game there a couple years ago, coming off the bye. Ashley, I think I would probably circle the Giants just because of the John Harbaugh effect. There's usually a team that has a new head coach where it's kind of like, okay, that changed things there. I would maybe circle them as my pick here.
They were going to be my pick too, because it's not only John Harbaugh who knows how to beat the Cleveland Browns, but you're talking about Jackson Dart's second year. You're talking Malik Neighbors is going to, sounds like, be ready for the start of the season after his ACL. Cam Scadaboo, I assume, would be back too and ready. I don't know the timeline for his injury that he had, but I would assume he'd be back as well. So a young, dynamic offense with, I think, a coach that is going to get them prepared on both sides of the ball. I mean, we obviously have seen it just with being in the division and how everyone talks about John Harbaugh, but now hearing how Todd Monken talks about him and the way he treats his off seasons and the preparation part of it, like, that definitely is the team to me that I feel like I've circled right now for this.
Okay, this is why we do this. This is why we talk schedule. Favorite trip. So, like, I'll be honest, and I am not complaining about getting sent to go to football games and watch football games on the road and go to different cities and things like that. But also, we've had better travel schedules than this year. Still, there are some good trips to be had this year. When you look at this schedule, what's your I don't even know why I'm asking you to this. I actually don't even
we
know.
have the
like,
same answer.
And we get to go there twice
because there's two of them. So
Oh,
yeah. So Ashley, you can pick the first New York trip, and Mary Kay, you can pick the second New York trip.
Yeah, I'll pick the Giants New York trip. Mary Kay can get the Jets one. But yeah, I mean, we both love New York. We've talked about it extensively on this podcast. I mean, last year we really made the most of it. I think we were able to get out of Cleveland a little early and get like a whole day Saturday in the city, have some really good meals and an amazing restaurant that Mary Kay found on Saturday night. We saw a Broadway show on Saturday afternoon. We saw chess, and it was amazing. It's nominated for a handful of Tonys. Mary Kay and I saw it in the previews. I mean, it wasn't even officially open yet. So Mary Kay and I know how to have fun in New York. We both love the city. We're we've been talking about it for months that we get to go there twice. So this wins for us this year. I'll speak for both of us on saying that.
It is a good trip. And Mary Kay, like, honestly, when you do look at this schedule, even though it's not, there's no Vegas, there's no LA, right? There's not that big, like, glitzy trip. There are places like New York and some other places on this schedule that if you're a Browns fan and you make a trip every year, there's at least three places on this schedule that you should circle and be like, yeah, I need to experience that place at least once.
Right. And I mean, I'll just very, very briefly about New York. I mean, the first thing that we're going to be looking for tomorrow night, of course, when the schedule comes out, is when we are going to New York. So I will take the Jets game there, but I'll bring up another city or two real quick. But I just wanted to also mention that one of the first things that we're going to do is start looking at Broadway tickets, because we are both very big Broadway fans. And and we're going to be looking at what else we can see when we go there. We had a wonderful time last year. I also have a daughter who lives in the East Village, so that's fun. And then I have another daughter who might be performing in a show in New York City while we are there potentially. So got to figure that all out. But anyways, those are some of the reasons that we love to go to New York. Of course, great restaurants, great shopping, great everything, and we are huge fans. But just in terms of bringing in another city to think about for a road trip, I would have to go with, New Orleans. You got to go to New Orleans and experience it at least once in your lifetime. Bourbon Street is crazy. It's, it's just eclectic. The food is amazing. The music there is amazing, with, of course, all the jazz and everything like that. And the weather is usually really good when we're there. So that's definitely fun. Of course, I would have preferred Paris. I would have preferred to face the Saints in Paris, but as I told someone today, I'm holding out hope for Rome next year. The Browns earned or were awarded international marketing rights to Italy in March. And so I'm hoping that they're going to be the first team that gets to play in Rome. And I've been to Rome. I absolutely love Rome. I'm also 50% Italian.
Oh, there we go.
So I'm very big on the whole like Italy piece. So looking forward to that. But in terms of these road trips this year, I would say after New York, get yourself down to New Orleans if you can.
Yeah, and even beyond Bourbon Street, like if that's not your thing, just New Orleans in general there's so much history there, and it's just a really cool place. And also from a football, I don't think there's a better professional football environment than the Superdome. It is unbelievable. Even when they're bad, it's just an incredible place. Like that, like football is just in the blood down there. So like it's pretty crazy to be in the Superdome. It's the loudest place I've ever been, and we've been to some loud places. I will say this too, like there are just a lot of places that if you've never experienced them, you have to go at least once. New Orleans is one of them. New York is one of them. You got to spend a Saturday night in Nashville on Broadway. Like it is, it, it's sort of like Vegas to me. Even if you're not a Vegas person, you have to experience Vegas once. Even if you're like, oh, Nashville, isn't that where everybody has their bachelorette parties and everything? And it's become so cliche. It doesn't matter. You've got to spend a Saturday night on Broadway because it is just, it is a scene. And we haven't been there since 2020 and it was COVID then. So like, it'll be interesting to kind of be back there on a Saturday night, experiencing just that whole, it's insane. It's nuts. I can't even, you've got to experience it.
It has gotten over the years, right? I mean, I've been going to Nashville for many, many years, and it has just mushroomed in terms of the population and what that street is like now, and just how absolutely crazy and insane it is. It's really not my wheelhouse anymore, shall we say. But I mean, I would love to like duck into some kind of an establishment on Saturday night where you can hear some amazing, amazing music. So I'm looking forward to it from that standpoint. But as far as kind of like getting around on Broadway in Nashville now, I'm like,
I can't do it anymore. I already know that. I'm already too washed for it. But like, it's still just it again. If you've never experienced it, it's one of those things that like you've just got to take it in and say, okay, I was there.
Right.
You do. I mean, I've only been there once, and it wasn't for work. You guys remember I was in my friend's wedding in the summer of 2022. So I also was not 30 yet. And I'm like, I think I probably couldn't hang on Broadway anymore because it is crazy. Like, you just won't believe the number of people in the bars. I mean, there's so many like historical places, like going to Tootsie's was like the one thing that all of our friends really wanted to do, our like first timers. And our friend who was getting married and lived there, she's like, yes, go experience it this like a one time. But it was a lot. It was fun. I'll also say I like Tampa. I'm not like, I know there's people out there who are just not like huge, like going to Florida people, or you don't want to go to Florida if it's too hot. But Tampa just like has those nice sort of chill vibes. I like the beaches down there. So that's my honorable mention, I will say, for this travel slate as well, besides the 3 we have listed.
I'm just generally not like a Florida guy. That's my problem. I'm just not. And I know we have some texters from Florida that, they text us when we have trips there and stuff. So, I appreciate you all. But I'm not personally not a big Florida guy. But nobody's
I
going to
was
say
going to say,
Jacksonville, huh?
are you a Florida man? Are you Florida man?
Well, we're
The news
gonna see a lot.
headlines.
We're gonna see a lot of those when we go to Jacksonville. That's for sure.
Right?
All right, there we go. The Orange and Brown Talk podcast schedule release. We will react to it after it comes out on Thursday night. So just get subscribed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Look for Orange and Brown Talk, or you can find us on YouTube, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. We're also on any social you've got. If you look for Orange and Brown Talk, you will find us. Give us a like, give us a follow anywhere you want to find us at. So for Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.